My fiance invited her ex-boyfriend to our wedding and called him the love of her life in front of everyone as a prank. So I pranked her back by pulling out of the entire wedding. All right, Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a long one. What happened at my wedding is still hard to believe, and I'm finally ready to share the whole story. I'm 29 million, and this is about how my psycho ex-fiance thought it would be hilarious to humiliate me at our own wedding, and how I completely destroyed her life in return. Fair warning, this story involves some serious revenge that might seem over the top, but after you hear what she did, I think you'll understand why she deserved every bit of it. Also, everything I'm about to tell you is completely true, and I have documentation for all of it. TLDR at the bottom, but honestly, you need the full story to understand how insane this situation was. First, some background so you understand what I had built and what she tried to destroy. I'm originally from Denver, studied business in college, and I've been running my own construction company for the past 6 years. Started with just me in a truck doing small residential jobs, but I've built it up to a solid operation with 12 employees doing commercial and high-end residential projects. The business does well. We're pulling in about $2.8 million annually, and I personally clear around $180,000 after expenses and payroll. Not rich by any means, but comfortable. I own a nice 4-bedroom house in a good neighborhood, drive a new Ford F-250 for work, and a Jeep Wrangler for personal use. I'm not flashy, but I've worked hard for what I have. I've always been the responsible type. Saved money, invested wisely, never lived beyond my means. My dad taught me early that if you want something, you work for it. No handouts, no shortcuts, just honest work and smart decisions. He ran his own electrical contracting business for 30 years before retiring, so I grew up understanding what it takes to build something from scratch. Starting the construction company wasn't easy. I spent the first 2 years working 80-hour weeks, taking jobs that bigger companies wouldn't touch, slowly building a reputation for quality work and fair pricing. I remember nights where I'd fall asleep at my kitchen table going over bids and estimates, trying to figure out how to price jobs competitively while still making enough profit to reinvest in better equipment. The breakthrough came in year 3 when I landed a contract to renovate a high-end restaurant downtown. The project went perfectly, came in under budget and ahead of schedule, and the owner started recommending me to other business owners. Word spread quickly in the local business community, and suddenly I had more work than I could handle alone. That's when I started hiring employees. First, my buddy from high school who was struggling to find steady work, then a few experienced guys who were tired of working for companies that didn't appreciate them. I made sure to pay fair wages and provide good benefits because I remembered what it was like to work for bosses who treated employees like disposable resources. I wasn't really looking for anything serious relationship-wise when I met Jessica. I was 27, focused on growing the business, and figured I had plenty of time for settling down. I'd date casually, but nothing stuck because most girls either weren't interested in dating a blue-collar guy or they were only interested in what I could provide financially. That's when I met Jessica at a charity fundraiser that one of my clients invited me to. She was volunteering at the event, seemed down to earth and genuine, and we hit it off immediately. She was 26, working as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit, and appeared to have her life together. Jessica was beautiful in that natural way. Auburn hair, green eyes, about 5 feet 5 inches with a great smile. She dressed nicely but not expensively, drove a reliable Honda Civic, and lived in a modest apartment with a roommate. Everything about her seemed normal and healthy. We talked for hours at that fundraiser. She was interested in my business, asked thoughtful questions about construction and running a company. She seemed impressed that I had built something from nothing but not in a gold digger way. More like she respected the work ethic. She told me about her work at the nonprofit, how much she loved helping people, how important it was to her to make a difference in the world. I've always admired people who can build things with their hands, she said. There's something honest about construction work. You can see the results of your effort. I was impressed that she understood the value of what I did. Most women I dated seemed embarrassed to tell their friends they were dating a contractor, like I was somehow beneath them, because I didn't work in an office. Jessica seemed different. Our first few dates were perfect. She insisted on splitting checks, never expected expensive restaurants or gifts, and seemed genuinely happy just spending time together. We'd go hiking in the mountains, check out local festivals, cook dinner at each other's places. She felt like the real deal. What really impressed me was how she interacted with my work crew when she'd occasionally stop by job sites. She'd remember their names, ask about their families, bring coffee for everyone. The guys loved her, which meant a lot to me because construction workers can usually spot fake people from a mile away. She's a keeper, my foreman told me after Jessica had visited one of our projects. Most contractors' girlfriends act like they're too good to talk to us. She's different. After about 4 months of dating, I was completely hooked. Jessica was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Smart, funny, independent, and supportive of my goals. She'd pack me lunch for job sites, celebrate when we landed big contracts, and never complained when I had to work late. We moved in together after 8 months, and she contributed equally to expenses despite making less money than me. She kept her own bank account, paid her share of everything, and maintained her independence. I respected that about her. Looking back, I should have paid attention to some early warning signs. But love makes you stupid sometimes. I proposed to Jessica after we'd been together for 2 years. I had been planning it for months, saved up for a beautiful ring, arranged a surprise weekend getaway to Aspen, the whole romantic thing. When I got down on one knee at sunset overlooking the mountains, she cried happy tears and said yes immediately. The first few weeks after our engagement were amazing. Jessica was excited about planning our future together, talking about the wedding, looking at venues, but then things started to change, slowly at first. It began with comments about the ring. It's beautiful, but don't you think we should have gone a little bigger? I mean, you can afford it. Or, my friend Sarah's ring is almost 3 carats. I told her mine is just over 1 carat, but it has better clarity. Then came suggestions about the wedding budget. We had originally agreed on a modest celebration, maybe $15,000 total for 80 guests at a nice local venue. But Jessica started pushing for more expensive options. Don't you want our wedding to be special? This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Your business is doing so well now. We can afford to do this right. I've been dreaming of my perfect wedding since I was little. Please don't make me compromise on the most important day of my life. The budget kept creeping up. First $20,000, then $25,000, then $35,000. Every time I questioned the costs, Jessica would get emotional and make me feel like I was being cheap or didn't love her enough. She quit her nonprofit job about 6 months before the wedding, saying she wanted to focus on wedding planning and preparing for our marriage. I thought it was a bit much for someone who had always been independent, but she convinced me it made sense. Wedding planning is basically a full-time job if you want to do it right, she said, and I want everything to be perfect for us. That's when I started paying for everything again. Jessica's half of our living expenses, her car payment, her personal spending, everything. When I brought up that maybe she should keep working until after the wedding, she'd get upset. I gave up my career to focus on us, she'd say. Don't you want me to make our wedding beautiful? The wedding planning process was exhausting. Jessica became obsessed with every detail and wanted everything to be expensive and over the top. Designer dress, premium venue, top-tier catering, professional videographer, live band instead of a DJ. The budget ballooned to $55,000. She started following wedding Instagram accounts religiously, showing me pictures of elaborate decorations and expensive venues. Look at this centerpiece design, she'd say, showing me flowers that cost $200 per table. Isn't it gorgeous? We have to have something like this. Every conversation became about the wedding. She'd wake up talking about table linens and go to sleep discussing floral arrangements. When I suggested we might be going overboard, she'd get upset and accuse me of not caring about our special day. This is the most important day of my life, she'd say with tears in her eyes. Don't you want it to be perfect? Don't you want people to remember our wedding as the most beautiful they've ever seen? I started feeling like I was planning a production rather than a wedding. Jessica seemed more interested in impressing our guests than celebrating our relationship. But the real red flags started appearing about 3 months before the wedding. Jessica's friends would giggle and whisper when I was around, then stop talking when I got close enough to hear. She'd get mysterious phone calls that she'd take in private. She started working out more and buying expensive new clothes and cosmetics, saying she wanted to look perfect for the big day. You're going to be so surprised, she'd say with this weird smile. I have something special planned for our wedding that you'll never forget. I asked her multiple times what she was planning, but she'd just laugh and say it was a surprise. Given her track record of good judgment, I figured it was something sweet like a special song or a video montage. I should have trusted my instincts that something was wrong. About 6 weeks before the wedding, my best friend Marcus threw me a bachelor party. Nothing crazy, just dinner at a nice steakhouse and some pool at a local bar with my closest friends and a few work buddies. Jessica was having her bachelorette party the same weekend in Las Vegas with her bridesmaids. During dinner, one of my friends brought up something that made my blood run cold. So what's the deal with Jessica inviting Tyler to the wedding? Asked my friend Chris, who worked in the same industry and knew a lot of people around town. Who's Tyler? I asked, genuinely confused. The table went quiet. Chris looked uncomfortable, like he'd said something he shouldn't have. Tyler Morrison, Jessica's ex-boyfriend from college. I heard through the grapevine that he's on your guest list. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That's impossible. Jessica never mentioned inviting any ex-boyfriends, and I definitely didn't approve anyone named Tyler. Marcus, who had been my best friend since high school and was serving as my best man, looked concerned. Dude, are you sure? Chris, where did you hear this? My cousin works at the venue where you're getting married, Chris explained. She was going over the seating chart with Jessica last week and mentioned that it was unusual to seat an ex-boyfriend at the head table area. Jessica just laughed and said it was going to be hilarious. The word hilarious made my stomach drop. Jessica had been talking about her special surprise for months. Was this it? I tried to stay calm and enjoy the rest of my bachelor party, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. When I got home that night, Jessica was already asleep, supposedly exhausted from her Vegas trip. The next morning, I decided to ask her directly. Hey, Chris mentioned something weird last night. He said you invited your ex-boyfriend Tyler to our wedding? Jessica's face went white for just a second before she forced a smile. Oh, that. Yeah, I invited Tyler. He's an old friend, and I thought it would be nice to include him. Why didn't you tell me? We went over the guest list together multiple times. I must have forgotten to mention it. It's not a big deal. He's just a friend now. But something in her tone told me she was lying. Jessica had never been good at hiding things from me, and she was definitely hiding something now. Jessica, what's going on? You've been talking about some special surprise for months, and now I find out you've secretly invited your ex-boyfriend. What aren't you telling me? She got defensive immediately. Why are you being so paranoid? Tyler is just a friend. You're acting like I'm planning to run away with him or something. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. Jessica was acting strange. Her friends were acting strange. And now there was this mystery ex-boyfriend showing up to our wedding. I decided to do some investigating. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention to Jessica's behavior and doing some discreet digging. What I found out made me sick to my stomach. First, I looked up Tyler Morrison on social media. Tall, good-looking guy who worked in finance in Chicago. According to his Facebook, he and Jessica had dated for 3 years in college and stayed in touch afterwards. His recent post showed he'd been in Denver several times over the past year, which Jessica had never mentioned. Then I found something that made my blood boil. Jessica had been texting with Tyler constantly. I only discovered this because she left her phone unlocked while taking a shower, and a text notification popped up from T saying, "Can't wait for Saturday. This is going to be epic." I knew I shouldn't look, but something about that message set off every alarm bell in my head. I clicked on the conversation and immediately wished I hadn't. I couldn't resist looking at their text conversation. What I found was devastating. The texts went back months. Tyler had apparently been Jessica's backup plan the entire time we'd been together. She'd been complaining to him about our relationship, saying things like, "I wish I was with someone more exciting," and "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together." There were messages about how boring I was, how she missed the passion they used to have, how she felt trapped in our relationship. One particularly painful text read, "Sometimes I look at him and wonder what I'm doing. You always understood me better." Tyler's responses were equally infuriating. He was encouraging her dissatisfaction, telling her she deserved better, that she was too good for someone like me. He was clearly trying to undermine our relationship from hundreds of miles away. But the worst part was discovering what her special surprise actually was. Jessica and her bridesmaids had planned an elaborate prank for our wedding day. Tyler was going to show up during the ceremony, and Jessica was going to pretend to have second thoughts about marrying me. She was going to call Tyler the love of her life in front of all our guests and act like she was torn between us. According to the texts, she planned to let this go on for several minutes while I stood there humiliated, then laugh and say it was just a joke, and that of course she was marrying me. She thought it would be hilarious and unforgettable. Her bridesmaids were all in on it. They'd been planning what to say, how to act, even what Tyler should wear. One text from her maid of honor said, "OMG, his face is going to be priceless when Tyler walks in." I felt physically sick reading those messages. The woman I was about to marry thought it would be funny to humiliate me in front of our family and friends on what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. But I also felt something else. Cold, calculating anger. If Jessica wanted to play pranks, I was going to give her a prank she'd never forget. I spent the next several days planning my response while acting completely normal around Jessica. She had no idea I knew about her plan. I had 2 weeks to plan my revenge, and I was going to make it count. If Jessica thought humiliating me at our wedding would be funny, she was about to learn what real humiliation felt like. First, I called my lawyer and had him draft a real prenuptial agreement with some very specific clauses. The prenup stated that if either party engaged in public humiliation or embarrassment of the other party during the wedding ceremony, the embarrassed party could immediately void the marriage and any shared financial obligations. The prenup also included detailed provisions about our shared assets. Since Jessica had quit her job and I'd been supporting her for months, I'd technically been financing her entire lifestyle. The prenup specified that in case of immediate annulment due to wedding day misconduct, she'd have 30 days to find new living arrangements and would not be entitled to any of my assets or ongoing financial support. It was completely legal and enforceable. And my lawyer thought I was being paranoid, but he drafted it anyway. Next, I visited the wedding venue and made some special arrangements with the coordinator. I explained that there might be some unexpected drama during the ceremony and asked if they could have security ready to remove disruptive guests if necessary. I also arranged for the DJ to have some specific songs ready to play on my signal. Then I hired a private investigator to document Jessica's relationship with Tyler. The PI got photos of them meeting for coffee, text message records, and even recorded a phone conversation where Jessica explicitly discussed her plan to humiliate me at the wedding. I also did some research into Jessica's background and discovered some things she'd never told me. She had significant credit card debt that she'd been hiding, had been fired from her previous job for sleeping with a married coworker, and had pulled similar pranks on previous boyfriends. Most importantly, I prepared my wedding guests for what was about to happen. I quietly reached out to my family and close friends and gave them a heads up that Jessica might try to cause drama during the ceremony. I asked them to just sit back and watch the show. The week before the wedding, I presented Jessica with a prenuptial agreement. My lawyer suggested we sign this before the wedding, I told her. Just standard protection for both of us. Jessica barely read it before signing. She was so focused on her prank that she didn't pay attention to the consequences she was about to face. Everything was set. Jessica thought she was going to humiliate me at our wedding. Instead, she was about to destroy her own life. The morning of our wedding, Jessica was practically vibrating with excitement. She kept making comments about how today is going to be so memorable, and you're going to be so surprised. I played along perfectly, acting like a nervous but happy groom who had no idea what was coming. The ceremony was held at an upscale venue outside Denver with mountain views. We'd invited 150 guests and spent a fortune making everything perfect. Jessica looked beautiful in her expensive designer dress, which made what was about to happen even more satisfying. Everything went normally until we got to the part where we were supposed to exchange vows. That's when Jessica's face lit up with that same mischievous expression I'd learned to recognize. She took the microphone from our officiant and turned to face our guests. "Before we continue," she announced, "I have a special surprise for my wonderful groom." She gestured dramatically toward the back of the venue, and Tyler walked in wearing an expensive suit. He looked exactly like what he was, a smug finance bro who thought he was about to be part of some hilarious joke. The guests murmured in confusion as Tyler walked down the aisle and stood next to Jessica. My family looked shocked, but my close friends just waited to see what I would do. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Tyler," Jessica announced with a huge smile. "He's my ex-boyfriend from college, and honestly, he's the love of my life." The venue went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I could see people in the audience looking at each other in confusion, trying to figure out if this was some kind of modern wedding tradition they weren't familiar with. My mother's face went from happy tears to shock to horror in about 3 seconds. My father looked like he was calculating whether he could reach Tyler before security stopped him. Jessica's parents looked absolutely mortified. Her mother was covering her mouth with her hands. Her father was turning red with embarrassment. Jessica continued with her prepared speech, clearly enjoying the shocked reactions from our guests. "I know this is supposed to be my wedding day, but seeing Tyler again has made me realize that maybe I'm marrying the wrong person. Tyler, do you still love me?" Tyler, playing his part in this sick joke, took her hand and looked into her eyes with practiced sincerity. "I never stopped loving you, Jessica. I came here today hoping you'd realize we belong together." Some of the older guests were starting to whisper among themselves. I could hear Jessica's grandmother asking someone, "What's happening? Who is that man?" A few people were actually starting to get up from their seats, apparently deciding they didn't want to witness whatever was about to happen. I watched my bride-to-be and her ex-boyfriend put on this performance in front of our family and friends, pretending to be torn between two men on what was supposed to be our wedding day. Jessica turned back to me with fake tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, but I have to follow my heart. Tyler is my soulmate, and I can't marry you when I'm in love with someone else." The guests were stunned. My mother looked like she was about to faint. Jessica's parents looked mortified, but Jessica and her bridesmaids were clearly trying not to laugh. That's when I smiled and started clapping slowly. Wow, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. That was quite a performance. Really impressive acting, Jessica. Jessica looked confused. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. I pulled out my phone and played a recording of her conversation with Tyler where they'd planned the entire prank. Unfortunately for you, I continued, I've known about your little joke for 2 weeks. Jessica's face went white as her own voice filled the venue, talking about how hilarious it would be to humiliate me and how much fun it would be to watch me squirm. So here's my prank, I announced to our guests. Jessica, you wanted to pretend to leave me at the altar? Well, I'm actually leaving you at the altar. I signaled to the DJ who started playing Hit the Road Jack instead of wedding music. Ladies and gentlemen, the wedding is over. Jessica just voided our prenuptial agreement by engaging in public humiliation during our ceremony. Our marriage is annulled before it even started. I turned to Tyler, who was looking like he wanted to disappear. Congratulations, Tyler. She's all yours. But fair warning, check her credit report before you get too involved. Then I walked out of my own wedding, leaving Jessica standing there in her expensive dress, completely destroyed. The aftermath of the wedding disaster was swift and brutal for Jessica. Within hours, videos of the entire incident were all over social media. Someone had live-streamed the ceremony for family members who couldn't attend, and the footage went viral. Wedding prank and the wedding revenge were trending on Twitter within 24 hours. Multiple angles of the incident emerged as more guests posted their own videos. There was the wide shot showing the entire scene, close-ups of my face during Jessica's surprise, reaction shots of horrified family members, and of course, the moment when I played the recording and walked out. The comments were brutal for Jessica. Imagine being this desperate for attention, wrote one user. She destroyed her entire life for a few minutes of drama, said another. This is what happens when social media addiction meets real life. Jessica became internet famous for all the wrong reasons. The story was picked up by major news outlets, YouTube channels, and social media influencers. She was dubbed the bride who got left, and became a cautionary tale about wedding pranks gone wrong. Reaction videos started appearing within days. YouTubers analyzed every moment of the incident. Relationship experts discussed the psychology behind Jessica's behavior, and comedy channels made memes out of her facial expressions. The whole thing snowballed beyond anything I could have imagined. But the social media humiliation was just the beginning of her problems. The prenuptial agreement I'd had her sign was ironclad. Since she'd engaged in public humiliation during our wedding ceremony, our marriage was immediately annulled, and she had no claim to any of my assets or ongoing financial support. This meant Jessica had 30 days to find a new place to live and support herself. Since she'd quit her job months earlier and had been living off my income, she was completely unprepared for sudden financial independence. It got worse. The viral videos caught the attention of her former employer, who confirmed that she'd been fired for inappropriate conduct. This made it nearly impossible for her to find new employment, especially since potential employers could easily Google her name and find the wedding disaster footage. Tyler, her supposed love of her life, wanted nothing to do with her once he realized the scope of the humiliation and backlash. He'd agreed to participate in what he thought was a harmless prank, not become part of a viral internet disaster that was affecting his own reputation and career. Jessica's credit card debt, which she'd been hiding from me, became a serious problem without my income to help manage it. She'd been spending freely for months, assuming she'd have access to my money after we got married. Her parents, who were conservative religious people, were mortified by her behavior and the public embarrassment. They refused to let her move back home and told her she needed to face the consequences of her actions like an adult. Within 2 months, Jessica had lost her home, her relationship, her reputation, and her financial security. She was forced to move into a studio apartment in a bad part of town and take a minimum wage job at a call center. But the real consequences were just beginning. The investigation I'd hired had uncovered Jessica's pattern of manipulative behavior with previous boyfriends. 3 other men came forward with similar stories of Jessica using and manipulating them, then discarding them when she got bored. One of her ex-boyfriends had been planning to propose when Jessica suddenly broke up with him via text message. Another had supported her through nursing school, only to have her leave him immediately after graduation for someone with more money. The pattern was clear. Jessica was a serial user who targeted successful men, manipulated them into supporting her lifestyle, then moved on when something better came along or when she got bored. Armed with this information and the documented evidence of her wedding prank, I made sure everyone in our social circle knew exactly who Jessica really was. About 8 months after our wedding disaster, Jessica started trying to contact me. It began with emails apologizing for the prank and asking if we could work things out. I know what I did was wrong, she wrote. But it was just supposed to be a harmless joke. I never meant to hurt you. Can't we move past this and try again? When I ignored her emails, she moved on to text messages, then phone calls, then showing up at my office and my house. Each contact was more desperate than the last. Please, she said during one particularly pathetic phone call. I've lost everything. I can't find a decent job because of those videos. I'm living in a horrible apartment and can barely afford food. I know you hate me, but can't you find it in your heart to help me? She tried every manipulation tactic in the book. Appeals to our shared history, promises that she'd changed, claims that she was suicidal, and it would be my fault if something happened to her. I gave up my career for you, she said, conveniently forgetting that she'd been fired from her previous job. You owe me something for the 2 years I invested in our relationship. The final contact came last month, when she showed up at my house unannounced. She looked terrible, clearly hadn't been taking care of herself, cheap clothes, obviously struggling financially. Her hair was greasy and unkempt. She'd lost weight in an unhealthy way, and she had dark circles under her eyes. I know you don't want to see me, she said, crying on my doorstep. But I'm desperate. I'm about to be evicted from my apartment. I can't find work anywhere because everyone knows who I am. My parents won't help me. You're the only person who can save me. She looked around nervously, like she was worried neighbors might recognize her from the viral videos. I've been living on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for weeks. I sold my car just to pay rent last month. I'm completely broke. She got down on her knees, literally begging. Please, I'll do anything. I'll sign any agreement you want. I'll never contact you again after this. I just need enough money to get back on my feet. Maybe help me move somewhere else where people don't know who I am. Please don't let me end up homeless. The desperation in her voice was real. This wasn't manipulation or crocodile tears. She was genuinely terrified about her future. Part of me almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered standing at that altar while she humiliated me for her own entertainment. I looked down at this pathetic woman who had tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I cared about, and I felt absolutely nothing. Jessica, I said calmly, you made your choice when you decided to humiliate me at our wedding. You thought it would be funny to destroy the most important day of my life for your own entertainment. Now you get to live with the consequences. But I'm sorry, she sobbed. I know it was wrong. Can't you forgive me? I forgive you, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm going to rescue you from the life you created for yourself. You're an adult who made adult choices. Deal with the adult consequences. I closed the door and haven't heard from her since.